If you skipped here, go back and watch the other part. It's really important. So in this episode, what we're going to do is take 3 really basic, really simple movements, and we just want to relate them to the skills that are required so that you guys understand or get to have a better understanding of what it is you need to work on in order to improve these skills. So it might be a little different way to look at these things than you have in the past, or at least hopefully it is, so that you have something to take with you and work on. But what we're going to do is cover 3 really simple movements. So let's have Phil just walk through them right now, and then we'll talk about them after. First one will be what we call a lead or a slide. Going forward, we call it a lead. Moving back, we call it a slide. Again, terminology is probably something that may be a little different than what you guys call it if you do this already. But just watch the movement, and what we call it doesn't even really matter. So let's have Phil do a slide back first. Go ahead, Phil.
Slide to the left. Slide to the...
Okay, and then coming forward, it would just be the same thing, the opposite movement. So it's just driving off that back leg and moving forward. So the second one is going to be a skip. Going back, the front leg would move towards the back leg. And then coming forward, the back leg would move toward the front leg. Okay, and then the third one is what we call a fast open or a fast close. So going back, what we want to do on this one is make sure we can focus on doing this in really one timing. So we don't want this one to have multiple timings to it. The best way to do this is to focus on moving through the ankles. So go ahead, Phil, going back. So this one, really, we're looking for both feet to move at the same time and not one leg to move before the other. Coming forward on the fast close, Phil. All right, so let's break these down a little bit now, and we just want to talk about what the fundamental differences are between them. So let's talk about the slide back first. What's happening on the slide back is Phil's essentially loading the front leg in order to push his center of mass backwards, okay? And so it can happen sometimes slowly, and a lot of times if you see little kids do it, they have a really big motion with it. A lot of times that back leg will lift off the floor first before it steps back, and the same thing happens on coming forward on the lead with it. So just think of the slide in the lead as pushing your weight in the direction you want to move. Okay? The second one, the skip, where one leg moves to the other leg. This one is essentially pulling your weight, because what happens is if Phil wants to move back with a skip, that front leg unloads, and then his body is pulling his center of mass backwards. Coming forward, that back leg unloads, and the body's pulling the center of mass forward. So think of the skip as pulling the body weight. Okay? We refer to that as your center of mass or your center, your body weight, whatever you want to call it. That's how you're creating that movement. The third one, the interesting thing about the third one, the fast close and the fast open, is that what's happening or what needs to happen to do it effectively is we need both the skill of pushing and the skill of pulling to happen simultaneously. So really what that looks like on the outside is tension or stability. And again, Phil's going to focus on moving through the ankles, but really what he's feeling in his body is a very quick tightening up and then relaxing after the movement happens. So go ahead, Phil. A little more with their feet together, coming forward on the fast close. Good. Okay, so that's the fast close. And the fast close, again, is a pushing and a pulling simultaneously. It's the movement that we'll use in athletes in this sport for getting feedback on what their weak links are in those 2 skills of both pushing and pulling, because it's easy to see when they're supposed to be happening at one time. So if we get an athlete that's better at pushing, we know their deficit is in the skill of pulling their center. And when we get an athlete that's better at pulling, we know that the deficit is in pushing. So we at least have a guide of where to begin working with that person. A lot of times it's going to be the coordination factor. So maybe it's something you guys haven't really practiced a lot of. The fast close is a good example because a lot of people in this sport will practice lead or the sliding and the skipping, but not a lot of people are practicing the fast close as a movement. Really quick about the differences in how we would use those things. The lead or the slide, since we can cover a pretty good amount of distance, we can use this just as we would use the skip over most of the distances that Phil covered in his previous episode, because it's a very adjustable, has a really a broad range of how far we're able to move with it. If we look at the fast close is basically a very short movement. So we use this more as an adjustment. It's not, we don't look at the fast close and the fast open as a big distance closer or a effective way to really take away a lot of distance from the opponent. We look at it more as a good way to adjust without showing the opponent what we're doing, because there's very little movement or counter movement to it. So there's not a lot of telegraphing when you're doing it. The quick note about the skip. So the skip is interesting because the timing on the skip varies from very quick, where it almost will look like an athlete is moving both feet at the same time. In fact, when we train the skip with a kick, we'll cue the athlete to work at moving both those feet at the same time. And it could go from that end of the spectrum to a really delayed skip where that back foot almost looks like it's stepping down and then the kick comes out. So those two, it's, we're not here to say whether one's right or one's wrong. Some people use either one really effectively, and they're different ends of the timing scale. I just am pointing out that there's a big, broad range of both timing and distance to be covered with the skip. And those would be the three really basic movements. If you aren't using one or two of those, make sure you get those in your arsenal now. They're very simple to use, and they have very different purposes in your fight. One of the best purposes may be just to give you a different look when you're doing that opening or closing.
So to use the K and P system we covered in episode 2, we could just say that the fast close is pretty much you're covering P1, P1 at a time. But the skips and the slide, you can pretty much cover like P4, or you could just go far with it. All right, guys, thank you for watching.
Whoa, hold on a sec.
Oh. Whoa. Well,
All right, go ahead.
nice shirt. Thank you for watching the YUNSHOW.